First. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. The November 27th, 2023 meeting of the Environmental and Public Works will come to order now. Would the clerk please read the roll?
Mr. Blankley. Mr. Blankley is present. Mr. Florio. Mr. Florio is present. Mr. Hebert. Mr. Hebert is present. Ms. Hugh Smith. Ms. Hugh Smith is present. Chairman Johns.
Here.
Chairman Johns is present. Mr. Mafucci. Mr. Mafucci is present. Mr. McCabe. Mr. McCabe is present.
Okay, is there anyone signed up for the public forum?
We have one speaker. I will call you up and you have 2 minutes to address the committee. Will Terrence Schnur come forward?
Do you believe that the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help"? Tell that to a distressed boater when the Coast Guard arrives. Tell that to the parents of a missing child when the police arrive. Tell that to a kid who's made a terrible mistake when an assistant public defender arrives. Tell that to an 85-year-old widower with no family when a letter carrier arrives with a Social Security check. Tell that to a student struggling to understand something when a teacher patiently explains it to them. If you've sat in this room for years and approved billions of dollars in governmental expenditures to try and help people and oppose a particular proposal, make arguments against that specific program or expenditure. Don't hypergeneralize by appealing to one of the silliest things ever said by a man who said a lot of silly things. Every time you walk into this building and every time you hear from a constituent, your first thought should be what are sometimes 9 of the most encouraging words in the English language. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Thank you.
Sir. Is there anyone else present here who's not signed up or would like to get up and speak? Okay, seeing none. At this time, I would like to introduce Robert Franklin, Chief Financial Officer for Monroe County. He's here to talk to us about the 2024 proposed budget in regards to environmental and public works. After he's done his presentation, we'll have a question and answer period. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Chairman. In keeping with tradition, this will be relatively quick and painless. I only have 6 slides. This is one of them. So, areas of Monroe County's budget pertaining to this EPW committee, as you already know, include the airport, our solid waste fund, facilities and fleet operations, and our division of pure waters. As a segment of the overall county budget, public works appropriations, as shown here, are growing by about $6.2 million. It's about 4.9% over the 23 adopted budget. That's not chump change, I realize that, but in the context of the overall budgetary growth for the county, $119.9 million in appropriations growth, this particular segment is relatively a small contributor to that overall growth. On this slide, what sticks out to me is the increase in engineering, facilities, and fleet. This increase really, for the most part, is driven by budgeting for the full redemption of a $3.6 million bond anticipation note. Redeeming our notes out of budget appropriation avoids issuing bonds and their associated long-term interest costs. And so had it not been for this particular one-time item, the increase we see on this slide for engineering, facilities, and fleet would have been a $1.1 million decrease instead. Looking at our Department of Aviation, as I've said in the past, airport expenses tend to be relatively stable from year to year. The proposed growth for 2024 is less than $1 million. It's about 3.3%. of their 23 adopted budget. And 3.3% is, as you know, a little bit below the rate of inflation. A lower projection for utility costs helped keep their budget down. And that particular line saved about $324,000. When you get into and look at the budget book, I think the biggest change you'll see is in the revenue section for the airport. The airport received ARPA funding from the FAA, which, at least over the past 2 years, has been used by the airport to defease a portion of their outstanding bonds and to offset a portion of the airline's rates and charges. That ARPA funding has been fully utilized, so you'll see a shift going forward from federal aid to reimbursement from the airport authority. If I can turn your attention to our solid waste fund, like the airport, we're proposing pretty much a maintenance of effort budget for solid waste, with their appropriations increasing by only $350,000 over the 23 adopted budget. Almost 80% of solid waste revenues and expenses are directly tied to each other. Expenses for our landfill host agreements, transfer hall contracts, public works contracts, all have equal and specifically attributable revenues. And they fluctuate from year to year, largely because of programming not necessarily related to Monroe County. The City of Rochester's Whole House Demos is their program. That's a good example of that. As the city identifies a greater or lesser number of houses for demolition, our revenues from the city increase or decrease in direct proportion to our contract increase for transfer and haul. One revenue in solid waste with significant variation from year to year, not tied to a direct expense, is revenue from the sale of electricity that's produced at the Mill Seat landfill. That's the gas to energy plant we have. Green energy is a commodity and it's subject to market conditions. And while market demand has remained high for the past several years, we do see fluctuations in supply. As a result, the revenue we earn for each megawatt hours of energy produced changes from year to year, even mid-year. For the proposed 2024 budget, market rates are on the upswing from a $44 per megawatt hour this year to $46.75 per megawatt hour next year. And although I guess I should note, although solid waste financial operations have improved significantly the past several years, our bottom line, our $2 million tax subsidy needs to continue for about another 4 years. The solid waste fund still owes the general fund $9.7 million. So when that debt goes away, so too can this general fund subsidy. And if we can turn our attention to engineering, facilities, and fleet, those areas combined have appropriations that are increasing by about $2.5 million over the adopted budget for 23. As I mentioned earlier, this increase in appropriations is primarily a result of budgeting that redemption of a bond anticipation note that was $3.6 million, which, at least on this slide, is part of the debt service and cash capital line. Absent that that note redemption, debt service actually would have come down by more than $800,000. Payroll and benefits combined are increasing $706,000. DES is adding 3 FTEs for HVAC maintenance. That's all county buildings, with the exception of MCH. But the bulk of the increase is from the annual contractually obligated pay and step increases, plus the higher costs of the employee retention bonuses that were approved earlier. 2 other notable changes are a lower projection of utility costs that saves over $1 million, and a lower projection of fuel costs, diesel, gasoline, propane, saving about $710,000. And then finally, my last slide turns your attention to our Pure Waters funds. Within Pure Waters, there's literally hundreds of things going on, so I'm just going to hit a few of the highlights. We're proposing an increase of less than $2.4 million in appropriations for Pure Waters. That's just about a 2.8% increase over the adopted budget for 23. Far shy of the 6.6 million you saw last year. So of that 2.4 million in appropriations increase, slightly more than half, about 1.4 million, relates to higher payroll and benefits. And that includes us applying a 12% vacancy factor on their positions. The remainder of that increase, at least most of it, is the result of budgeting a new cash-funded capital project, and that's the replacement of heavy equipment in the amount of $750,000. Pure Waters fund balance, like every year, this year about $5.9 million is being used to support their operations, but ratepayers in each district will also see a 3% rate increase. The rate increase impacts the average household anywhere from $4, say in Northwest Quadrant or Arundecoit Bay, South Central, to upwards of $8 in Gates, Chi, Ogden, and the Rochester district. Pure Waters is where the Office of Sustainability and Environmental Quality was created in this particular budget. Organizationally, it's a separate office within Pure Waters administration, and is supported by both Pure Waters ratepayers and county taxpayers. And the office oversees both environmental quality improvements and our climate action initiatives under the county's climate action plan. And related to climate action, their initial work for 2024 will focus on the installation of electric vehicle charging stations and the development of a broader EV master plan. So, Mr. Chairman, that's really it. When I get back to the table, happy to answer questions.
Legislator McCabe.
Like, wait till Mr. Franklin gets seated. Mr. Franklin, through the chair, can you provide the legislature with a breakdown of all the positions that fall under this portion of the budget? This would be under aviation, sorry. The positions that fall under this portion of the 24 budget that are authorized, funded, and vacant. And could you also provide the breakdown of each title and this corresponding budgeted amounts of salary, retirement, social security, medical insurance, and dental insurance, please?
Mr. Chairman, you'll find the authorized positions actually for each of our departments in this budget in the back of the budget book. It's one of the very last sections. A breakdown of every single position by salary, medical, dental, et cetera, is generally not shared. We do not share employee-specific information. But you can see in the authorized positions at the back of the book, their pay group, and the budget includes the salary schedule for each pay group, so at least you get a flavor of the salary range paid to each person.
Can you also indicate the fund, department, and cost centers charge for each of these positions?
Mr. Chairman, if we are still speaking about the Department of Aviation, the Airport Authority does not have any of its own staff. They all, the Airport Authority contracts with Monroe County, and each of the positions in the Department of Aviation are accounted for in the Airport Enterprise Fund. In fact, all the appropriations in the budget book for the airport are accounted for in that particular enterprise fund.
Just so we're clear, all these questions will be in regards to the aviation budget, Mr. Franklin, that I have. Through the chair, what percentage of the department's budget is mandated versus non-mandated?
Mr. Chairman, I don't generally keep track of that for this particular presentation, so that information will be queried from our system, and we can follow up with the committee members prior to the full legislature.
Thank you. Through the chair, how much, if any, general fund balance is being applied to the aviation department budget? And if general fund balance is being applied, what is the breakdown of restricted versus unrestricted applied fund balance?
Mr. Chairman, for the proposed budget, the general fund is not supporting the Department of Aviation. There is appropriated fund balance within the department, but that really is pertaining to our reserve for bonded debt, and that comes from the debt service fund.
Through the chair, what is the breakdown of the aviation budget as it is relates to appropriations charged to general fund, debt service, and capital projects?
Mr. Chairman, the appropriations that are laid out on page 73 of the proposed budget for the Department of Aviation all pertain to the Aviation Enterprise Fund. The enterprise funds actually account for their own debt service. So unlike a governmental fund, like the road fund or the general fund, whose debt service is accounted for in the debt service fund, all these appropriations are within the airport authority. I'm sorry, the airport enterprise fund.
Through the chair, have any of the capital projects that were included in the 24 to 28 capital improvement plan been delayed, downsized, or canceled? And if so, can you provide the committee with a list of those affected projects and revised budgets and or timelines?
Mr. Chairman, that information will be prepared and presented to the full legislature before March 31st in our capital budget status report that is required by the charter. I can tell you that if any project was delayed, it's at the request of the Federal Aviation Administration. They, on a dime, often drop new projects into our lap and ask us to advance other projects or otherwise push out some projects.
And through the chair, on page 71, the 2023 major accomplishments, why wasn't using federal COVID-19 funds to help supplement airport operations listed as a 23 major accomplishment?
Through the chair, Andy Moore, Director of Aviation. The answer to that question is basically, I didn't consider that a major accomplishment, to be honest with you. The federal government did provide airports across the United States with some additional federal funding. We use that federal funding to help offset costs for the airlines as passenger flows were down considerably, and I just did not add that into an accomplishment for that year.
And through the chair, on on the same page 71, 2023 major accomplishments, why wasn't the development of a Real ID public education plan listed as a 23 major accomplishment?
Through the chair, back in December of 2022, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security extended the Real ID date. Originally, the Real ID for New York was going to be in May of 2023. They extended that to May 7th of 2025. So you do not need a Real ID, or you do not need to be Real ID compliant in air travel till May 7th, 2025, per the U.S. Department of Homeland Security.
Thank you. And through the chair, on page 70, on page 72, 2024 major objectives, you list construction projects under the Upstate Airports Economic Development and Revitalization Grant. Can you give an update of where the overall project stands?
Through the chair, I'd be happy to. I'll make this as short as I can because I can talk about this for a long time. Back in late 2022, Governor Hochul announced 9 airports would receive state funding for the upstate redevelopment and economic development projects for terminals. Rochester was one of those 9 selected and chosen. So we're very proud of that. Since then, moving into 2023, our engineering and architecture firms have been putting together final design and final estimates on projects before they went to bid. Right now, we have 6 bid packages that went out, and they have come back in. And so we are in the process now of meeting with all the contractors, the contractors that were low bid, and then also meeting with our design build for the Frederick Douglass Initiative, the company that was awarded that contract. So there's 7 different bid packages. And we're at the kind of the tail end of our meetings, making sure i's are dotted and t's are crossed, going through the procurement process, not only with the county, but at the state of New York, making sure everything's in place there. And I expect construction to start out at the airport moving into 2024 for the 6 different projects, major projects that we have going on to date. To just kind of give you a little idea, the canopy extensions, right now, we're looking at those starting in April of 24 and going roughly into October, November of 24. The parking guidance system, which I'm really excited about, will start roughly in February of 24, be completed in August, September of 24. The arrivals area in the terminal, the lower level area, that is going to start right in the March timeframe and will continue through the end of 2024. Included in that is the Frederick Douglass Initiative, which will start probably, we're looking at the February time period, moving into completion date in December, January of 2024. We have baggage, the TSA checkpoint, we've got fire alarm, fire detection systems in the terminal. And then the roundabout was completed last year. So that's kind of a status update of where we are. Obviously, with construction going on, we're working with our car rentals, our tenants, our airlines, everybody that comes in and out of the airport to try to minimize inconveniences as much as possible. So that's a part of the planning process. And hopefully we will be able to stay on schedule as I know it today.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Thank you, Mr. Franklin. I yield.
Thank you. I have a few appropriations questions with regard to the airport budget. On page 564, I noticed, and I noticed this in a couple of other places in the budget, that the software appropriation was decreasing to 0 this year. Is that a restructuring of how you're budgeting for software?
It's a, it's a painful process, Mr. Chairman. Yes. And people are slow to change. All of us. We created the new account 504-260 software licenses last year as a means to get ready for, I think it's GASB 97, which we are required to value subscription-based IT products as if it were like a capital lease. So throughout the departments, you will see
Excuse me. Thank you.
some successful attempts and some failed attempts at moving items out of one of the supplies and materials, an account called computer software, up to contractual services, the account software licenses. That happened for, on page 564, Department of Aviation, account 505020, computer software was budgeted 1156 prior, and then in 24, it's moving up to software licenses. And coincidentally, it's the same dollar amount.
Thank you. On page 565, there was a somewhat significant jump in medical insurance. Is there a specific reason for the increase?
Yes, Mr. Chair, managers from Department of Human Resources and myself meet annually with our medical insurance brokers, Brown & Brown, to review service utilization and cost trends. And what they are seeing for fiscal year 24 is a 12% increase in the cost of medical. Obviously, that varies from the type of product an individual selects as their health insurance, or whether they're a retiree already on Medicare, or a retiree. We still have a couple handfuls of retirees who are in a Blue Million-like product. So 12% is probably the largest increase we've seen since we went self-insured back in 2014.
Thank you. On page 566, the law department increase, again, fairly significantly from 6,000 and change to 47,000.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, this actually is part of our ICAP plan. ICAP is an acronym, the Indirect Cost Allocation Plan, which is prepared as required on an annual basis, required by the federal government. It does lag. So the budget for 24 is based on the 24 ICAP plan that was developed earlier in the summer of 23, and we have to use actual expenses from the year 22. So there's always a lag. But whatever work was performed within the law department that is applicable to a variety of departments across the county is measured by one of our accountants, all formulaic and mathematically driven.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the administration. I'm going to continue the line of questions of Legislator DeFlorio. On page 572, appropriations, airport field operations. IS medical retirees is increasing from $267,000 to $318,000. Is there a reason for the increase?
Yes, Mr. Chair, our retiree insurance, there's a couple different flavors. I talk about a 12% increase in the cost of medical, depending on retiree Medicare, active, pre-Medicare retiree. Your rate increases anywhere from say 11.8% to 12.2%. So I'm just going to generally talk about a 12% increase. So that is actually applicable throughout the range of employee we have, active or retired.
Understood, but through you, Mr. Chairman, the administration, this one is more of a 25% increase.
So I do speak generally, Mr. Chairman, when I talk about rate increases like 12%. When it comes to department expenses, there is a little bit more math involved. It's formulaic though, driven by the retirees from the department they retired from, and the type of medical they had at the time of their retirement. So based on the airport's list of retirees and the products they choose when they left county employment, drives the cost that's charged.
Thank you. Also on page 572, appropriations, airport field ops, IS. It's increasing from 14,490 to 25,994. What's the reason for that 75% increase?
Mr. Chairman, like medical, depending on the committee you sit on or the department you want to ask questions about, you're going to see increases in county IS chargebacks to the departments. The county IS budget this year, I'm not going to look at them again until Ways and Means, but I think their budget increased by $3.5 to $4 million this year. Cybersecurity issues, the soon to implement transition from SAP to a new ERP system has really driven their costs. And they have a formula by which they charge back a variety of their costs to individual departments. So this cost, Mr. Chairman, is up because the overall county IS budget has dramatically increased.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next question, and thank you for that answer. And I'm glad to hear that the IS budget is up, actually, given the nature of what's going on in information technology world, having come from that. On page 573, appropriations, airport, custodial operations, maintenance. The buildings maintenance is decreasing, again, about a third. Why is that happening?
So, Mr. Chairman, what we budget in repairs and maintenance of buildings specific to custodial operations is really the maintenance of our loading bridges, which are in the process of being replaced. We have a capital fund. It is a multi-year process, but as new bridges are deployed to the airport, the ongoing cost of maintenance should come down. Above and beyond that, this budget accounts for repairs and maintenance of our elevators and escalators at the airport. And we are seeing a decrease in the budget for electrical services, which may or may not actually come to fruition.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chairman of the administration, good lead into my next question, page 575, revenues, airport building maintenance, ops, utilities. Electric decreases from, again, about 20%. And during your presentation, you indicated that the value of the green kilowatts that are being produced is actually going up because the price is going up. How do I level set between those two rather different statements?
Just, Mr. Chairman, can I clarify, are we talking about the account for utilities, electric?
It's 1.23 million in
Yes.
23 and 1 million in 24.
Thank you, thank you. You may recall, the members here may recall, Mr. Chairman, utilities kind of skyrocketed at the end of 21 and into 22. We actually amended the 23 budget and I think 22 as well to push more dollars into that particular line. Fortunately, and actually I did comment this on last year's presentation, but I think it would pertain to DES. The cost of diesel, gasoline, and electricity had a dramatic increase in Pure Waters. And my comment in that presentation was, I believe it was going to be short-lived, as those were, if you ask the right economists, projected to come down in subsequent years. And I think we are seeing exactly that in this particular line as well.
All right, on page 689, a big jump here. I'll give you a minute. Revenues, airport administration, federal aid decreases from over $4.5 million to under $300,000. Can you address the reasons?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that really is the result of this year, 23, being the final year of utilizing the FAA's ARPA revenue.
Okay, and a follow-up question to that, Mr. Chairman, through you to the administration. Is that being made, how is that gap being made up in the budget?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, we actually talked about that at the authority board meeting. I think it was last week. The airlines were well aware that the FAA was providing this funding, and we were using our revenues to reduce the rates and charges that the airlines have to pay us. So at the end, with this funding being fully utilized going forward, the airlines know that their rates and charges are being reset to what they were prior to this funding. So the answer to the question is the airlines are making up for this loss of revenue.
Very well, very good. Through you, Mr. Chairman of the administration, page 694. Revenues, environmental services, solid waste admin, solid waste tipping fees. Saw a close to a $300,000 increase from year to year. What's the reason for that?
So there's a good reason for this, Mr. Chairman. And by the way, this particular line does include our royalties we receive from the landfill, in tipping fees paid by others, and including the city of Rochester for the house demos. Don't like to brag about this, but as has come up by prior legislators, the late legislator Haney. This line's a plug. Okay, it's a plug figure. And and I've said this at prior meetings as well. This budget as proposed purposefully shorts the revenue in order to force a $2 million net county support requirement. That's the method we chose to present in this book on how to subsidize solid waste $2 million a year.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, the administration, if I understand you correctly, that is essentially giving some taxpayers back some of their money? The net effect of that? I mean, if we're charging lower tipping fees, in theory, the solid waste pickup companies could be charging consumers less.
The tipping fees are market-driven in our community and throughout the state, actually. I will tell you the revenue, if we did not force a $2 million subsidy to the solid waste fund, this revenue line would be $2 million higher. Fine.
I'm with you.
Okay?
Which the garbage companies, through you, Mr. Chairman, would see as an increased cost of doing business.
No, Mr. Chairman.
Missing something. Thank you.
The garbage companies are not paying us $5.2 million. The garbage companies are paying us $7.2 million. The mechanism we chose to employ to force a general fund subsidy was to shortchange this revenue line so that it appeared to be less to force the need for a $2 million subsidy. Solid waste will generate a profit, Mr. Chairman, that's not shown in this budget book. And that profit, to the tune of $2 million, is used to recover the accumulated deficit in that fund, which I think in 2014 topped $20.5 million. And where did they get the money from? They got the money from the general fund. So this subsidy, plus a whole host of fixes, I guess I'll say, that Director Garland has employed to turn around solid waste operations, have now reduced that accumulated deficit in the fund to about 11 million, maybe give or take, and reduce the cash owed to the general fund down to 9.7 million, which is why I say we need about 4 more years of this subsidy before it can go away.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. Now I understand through you, Mr. Chairman. Last couple more questions. Again, on page 694, solid waste admin sale of recyclables. It decreased by, again, 33%-ish. And I'm assuming that has to do with the collapse of the recyclables market, but could you confirm that or tell me the reason why?
We're going to tag, Director Garland and I are going to tag team on this. There are a lot of market forces, and you're not wrong about the collapse of the recycle market, but Mr. Garland's going to fill in for me here.
Chair, the markets are still generally robust. However, we are no longer receiving a royalty on glass. That's the one component that we were receiving a royalty on, but because there isn't market value yet on that glass, we didn't receive a royalty. So that's one of the reasons why you see the revenue down. Waste Management is working on a glass processing. They've installed a new glass processing line with the hopes of finding an end market for that. We are using the glass presently as a alternative daily cover and construction material at the landfill, so it's providing some benefit, but it's not being recycled into glass. And when glass is recycled at the supermarket, it's segregated, it's kept clean, it's separated by color, and it's really eternally recyclable in that manner. But when it's mixed with, we call MRF glass, from MRF being a materials recovery facility, it's dirty, it's commingled with a lot of other recyclables, and the colors are not segregated. So it's not a marketable material in that manner yet. But I am impressed with Waste Management taking the steps to install processing lines that will hopefully add value to that glass, and then we can begin receiving a royalty on that.
Through Mr. Chairman, the administration, there's a addition of an assistant supervisor of building maintenance in Group 13 included in this budget. Can you just tell us why?
Through the chair. As you all know, the airport is a 24/7 operation. As I like to say, it never closes. And it's become kind of an issue now where typically on the overnight or C shift, there can be jet bridge issues at 2 o'clock in the morning, at 3 o'clock in the morning. There can be toilets that overflow. There can be issues at the airline gates, these types of things that seem to always occur, not 9 to 5 during the day. And so having an additional maintenance building supervisor there, not only to help out on the C shift, but also to help out on the B shift, the 3 to 11 p.m., really makes sense and can address these issues immediately and efficiently in order to make sure there's no interruption to air travel. And that also applies not only with car rental issues, but also with concession issues too. So I think it's very important that we have somebody on site dedicated to the terminal that can address these types of issues really during non-peak hours. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just a quick follow-up. You indicated concessions and rental cars, and it's been a while since I came in at 2 in the morning or something, but as I recall, both rentals and concessions are pretty much shut down at that point. So can you just comment on that?
Through the chair, absolutely. The car rentals typically will stay open to the very last customer's arrivals. Doesn't mean all 6 car rentals will be open, but if they have a reservation for someone flying in on what we call a terminator flight, the 11 p.m., 12:30 a.m., and if that's delayed till 1:30, that car rental typically will stay open for that customer. And so if there's an issue with their operation, somebody's there to help. With concessions, this individual, my plan is to have this individual also working a portion of the B shift, the 3 to 11 p.m. And so the food concessions, let's say gift news, food, beverage concessions, will stay open typically to about a half hour before the last departure, scheduled departure. So that's about 8 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. Again, when most of the maintenance staff and mechanical staff are not at the airport. So that would help cover those types of issues at that time period too. But yeah, a typical concession is not going to be open at midnight or 2 in the morning at an airport.
Thank you. I yield the floor for the moment.
Kind of environmental services, and they're similar to what I asked before. So through the chair, what percentage of the department's budget is mandated versus non-mandated?
Mr. Chair, we'll have to follow up on that answer.
All right, and through the chair, how much of any general fund balance is being applied to the environmental services department budget? And if general fund balance is being applied, what is the breakdown of restricted versus unrestricted fund balance?
I just got to flip to that page, Mr. Chairman. I have a note. So it looks like environmental services is appropriating over $106.8 million for the year. that can be broken down to the Pure Waters Fund. I'm gonna round the numbers if I may. $86.4 million in the Pure Waters Fund, $1.9 million in the General Fund, $12.3 million in the Solid Waste Fund, $6.3 million in the Internal Services Fund, and lastly, $7,700 in the Debt Service Fund. The reason this is split across so many funds, Mr. Chairman, is DES is a large organization and they're broken up. Engineering is in the general fund. Obviously, Pure Waters is in the Pure Waters Fund. The solid waste is accounted for in the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. All our fleet and building service accounts are accounted for in the Internal Services Fund. I think I mentioned before, the enterprise funds account for their own debt service, but because engineering has a small piece in the DES has a small piece of their operations in the general fund, engineering, that's where you find that $7,700 being accounted for in the debt service fund.
Thank you. I yield for now.
Florio.
You, through the chair to the administration, some questions on accomplishments and objectives. On page 116, major accomplishments, doesn't appear that public waste education and outreach for the Recycle Right message was continued. That outreach been eliminated, or was it just not?
Public education and outreach for Recycling Right continues with the same level of effort. It will continue next year as it has this year. It continues to be a priority for the division, just not mentioned or highlighted here.
Thank you. And I'm through the chair to the administration on that same page, the solid waste reuse and recycling law. Why wasn't it? Sorry. Previously, it was revised to better reflect current trends in the industry, and that didn't continue in 2023 major objectives.
The solid waste reuse and recycling law was originally written in 1991, and through the chair, that will continue as really an objective for 2024. There's other work that we wanted to accomplish before we worked on revising the law, namely completing our organics management plan. There's other changes at the state level as it related to organics recycling. So we wanted to see where the state was going with that further before we were to revise that law.
Thank you. And through the chair to the administration, again, on page 116, solid waste management, were any educational materials developed to comply with the NYSDEC regulations on food waste recycling in county facilities and the community?
Through the chair, yes, we did develop information, public information, particularly for the residents that participated in the town of Pittsford food scraps recycling program. So through the chair, we provided that information to the residents. It is made available to those who may want it. It's available online. So yes, we did create information for food scraps recycling.
Thank you. And through the chair to the administration, just to kind of piggyback on that, could you give us any data in terms of that Pittsford project and how it's going?
Through the chair, yes, I'd be happy to. As you know, that program began in earnest in the middle of September. To date, we have 515 town registrants. We've had 1,408 recorded drop-offs. I would say we have 382 very active users. Again, we continue to monitor participation, naturally. Our single biggest drop-off occurred on Saturday, November 4th. We still have some residents to pick up their buckets, but we're in communication with them, encouraging them to do so. But I would say we're seeing excellent participation amongst the residents. We're getting good data.
And through the chair to the administration, when did that officially kick off, did you say?
Through the chair, September 18th.
And through the chair to the administration, in terms of some additional items that were listed as major objectives but aren't noted here in the budget book, could you give us a status on the MCC Improved Safety Downtown Campus Entrance Project?
Through the chair, we intend to commence construction in 2024 for that project. We have advanced the design. It is under review right now with the city, their engineering group, and the Traffic Control Board.
Thank you. And through the chair to the administration, so was that delayed? Because originally that was an objective for this year, or was it?
Through the chair, the design has taken a little bit longer than we had anticipated, but I would say that's in large part because we've been coordinating with stakeholders and making sure we're building a project that meets the needs, both the city and MCC.
Thank you. And through the chair to the administration, similar question with regard to the MCC Expand Virtual Learning Center project that started.
Through the chair, that ran into some budget constraints. So we are in the process of rescoping that project so that we can deliver a project on time and under budget.
The chair to the administration, could you elaborate on the budget constraints?
Through the chair, it's a relatively small space that it's planned to be renovated. And it really comes down to MCC. I think once they got into the design and planning of the renovation, the scope grew grew beyond the budget. So we're working with MCC to bring that scope within budget and hopefully meet their operational programmatic needs.
Got it. Thank you. And through the chair to the administration, what additional projects are yet to be completed for Innovative Field?
Through the chair, the home clubhouse and the batter building, that work is a significant element of the MLB project, and that will be completed by opening day next year. The visitor clubhouse is complete. The scoreboard's complete. The kitchen expansion under the patron improvements project, that is underway now, as well as wayfinding and lighting improvements. Going into opening day 2025, there are some security improvements that are required under the MLB project.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration, could you give us a status on the city place renovations project and what still needs to be completed there?
Through the chair, we expect a first quarter move-in for that project. So first quarter of next year, the project will be substantially complete.
Thank you. through the chair to the administration, on page 116, if we could get an update on the county office building HVAC renovation project.
Through the chair, again, that was a project that we are redefining the scope to be able to meet the budget or identify critical items, and if there are any additional budget requests associated with that project to meet the needs of an HVAC renovation for this project. So we are currently reviewing the design, and we'll be meeting obviously with Director Franklin on that going forward.
To the chair to the administration, were there specific reasons for cost? I'm assuming costs were higher than projected.
Yes, through the chair, our original scope involved the contractors working at night. So you're paying a premium for that evening work to minimize disruption in the building. So we're working on a plan now that the work could be accomplished during the day in ways that wouldn't disrupt county operations. It might require some folks to work from home. It might require some folks to work in other vacant county buildings temporarily. So we think that will be a significant step towards reducing the cost of the project.
Thank you. And through the chair to the administration, can we get a status on the Arundequoit Bay Pump Station Improvement Project?
Sure. Through the chair, again, that's ongoing work with primary elements within the Arundequoit Bay Pump Station. It's our largest pump station of the 63 that the county owns and operates. Pump replacement, motor control center replacement, and valve replacement is primarily the work that we're doing this year into next year.
Thank you. And through the chair to the administration, on page 116, why wasn't the Monroe County sewer use law updated as was previously listed in last year's objectives?
Through the chair, we've been working diligently through this year, particularly with the support of Deputy Chief Attorney Laura Smith, who takes great interest, believe it or not, in the sewer use law. And if anyone's having trouble sleeping tonight, I suggest you go online and read the old one, because it will put you right to sleep. But nevertheless, she's done great work in revising it. That will require the EPA, the US EPA, to review that as well. So it's we've done a very, very thorough review, and I really credit the law department doing a great job bringing that law up to where it is. But we've got a few more steps to go before we can bring it back to legislature for approval.
Thank you. And can we get, through the chair to the administration, an update on the electric system improvement project?
Through the chair, if you're referring to on page 116, Pure Waters, the Van Lair electrical system improvement
Yes.
project, that project is completed. And we take great pride in that accomplishment, and grateful for the capital support for that, which is greatly improving the reliability and resiliency of power supply to Van Lair. And it also is making room for three 2.5 megawatt each backup generators, which we are hopeful will receive a federal grant to support the acquisition of those generators. So as it relates to this is going a long ways towards the resilience and reliability of plant operations.
Thank you. And through the chair to the administration, one more on one page. Well, actually, no, I have a couple more on page 116. Was an open house at the Northwest Quadrant hosted?
Through the chair, yes, we did have a open house at the Northwest Quadrant, and we had a lot of active and involved residents that were grateful for the tour. We had a beautiful day for it.
Wonderful. Thank you. In terms of on page 116, major accomplishments, the lithium battery recycling program, has this been successful, and what exactly is this program entail?
Through the chair, we take all sorts of batteries at the Eco Park with the exception of alkaline, which are suitable to go in the trash, but and there's not a suitable market, aftermarket for alkaline batteries. But we do take lithium ion batteries at the Eco Park. We have been taking them for a number of years, but through our relationship with Waste Management, Sun King, we've been able to expand really public outreach associated with lithium-ion batteries in the safety elements associated with it, so residents know what to do with those batteries. So the program's been successful. People have been returning them. We know there's more lithium-ion batteries and lithium batteries now in consumer products that have caused fires at home, you know, scooters and e-bikes, things like that, where the batteries are much larger now than they were before. So the residents continue to utilize the program. We were partnering with, through Sun King with Li-Cycle, but we have many other outlets to, for that material to be recovered.
Thank you. And through the chair to the administration, and I know Director Franklin had mentioned expansion of ports, I guess you would call them, for electric vehicles. Are these installation of stations, are they for public consumption or just county vehicles or a mixture?
Through the chair, yes, the ones that were announced this year and the ones that are identified here on the bottom of page 116 are available for the public. And the others that are identified for objectives next year will also be available for the public, as actually part of the grants that we've received from New York State. We do have some EV charging stations at core county facilities that wouldn't generally be accessed by the public at Van Laer, at the Fleet Center. Those are exclusively for county vehicles. But the ones listed and the more public-facing facilities are available for the public.
Thank you. And through the chair to the administration, so one last question. Is there a charge to the public for utilizing these?
Through the chair, yes, there is. Through the chair, it's $2.25 an hour to charge.
Thank you. And I yield the floor.
Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don't sound so excited. And I want to make sure Ms. Smith is awake on the administration side. Somebody said she was napping earlier. I can't see that far, so. Anyway, back to a number of appropriations questions. Through you, Mr. Chairman, the administration, on page 584. Appropriations of Environmental Services, Pure Waters District, GCO District, Contracted Debt Service. And before I ask this specific question, we've got 4 different Pure Waters districts. I suppose I could ask it repeatedly about each of them, but to the extent you can generalize your answers, that's fully acceptable for any of these Pure Waters district questions. We see as about, again, close to a 1/3 decrease on the debt service. Could you explain why that's happening, Mr. Franklin?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. For the most part, contracted debt in the Pure Waters districts primarily relate to New York Power Authority, NYPA funding, as opposed to a bond issuance. But contracted debt for each of the individual, so basically the debt is accounted for in one place and then we allocate it to each of the districts, right? So GCO has to pay Northwest Quadrant 150 grand contracted debt sitting at Northwest Quadrant. It has to pay the Rochester district 259 grand for the contracted debt sitting in the Rochester district. So over the course of time, as we pay down these NYPA loans, actually debt service should be coming down a little bit each year.
Got it. For you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, on page 584 again, appropriations, environmental services, Pure Water GCO District, activity allocation for vehicles. It is increasing about 240%. address the reason for that increase.
Through the chair, that's an allocation for vehicle chargebacks for work orders. So on work orders, we charge for labor, materials, equipment, and vehicle usage. And there's a lot of work going on in GCO. I would say this is probably a reflection of more accurate work orders, as well as increased projected activity in 2024.
Just tag team on that. Mr. Chairman, for a number of Pure Waters purchases, there's the item being purchased is shared across all 4 districts. So for a lot of items, we'll purchase it out of our Pure Waters Administration Fund Center. And then the cost of that item that is shared amongst other districts is captured in the work order system so that the piece of its debt service, so to speak, is then allocated. It's just a matter of putting the value of the expense where the cost should reside.
Understood. Through Mr. Chairman, the administration, I'm going to try to ask this as a generic question as opposed to a specific line item question. But similar to the answer you just provided, there's a lot of fairly substantial percentage-wise movements and things that related to the admin charges. Is it similar to the answer you just gave, the reasoning for that?
So, Mr. Chairman, depending on the item, there's a variety of methods DES employs to allocate costs across all 4 districts or other departments if they're doing work for another department. Costs shared between the 4 districts, a lot of that is a ratio of flows, and DES captures how much wastewater is flowing through a particular pump station, and they know where it all comes from. They map out all their conveyance lines. So flow meters are very important in cost allocations. When it comes to an item, say like an allocation of vehicle, a lot of estimation goes in there. You estimate the useful number of hours of a vehicle. Vehicles aren't really measured in terms of years, they're measured in hours of use. So then whatever the cost of the vehicle divided by the estimated hourly life is derived value that gets put on a work order so it can be allocated to the consuming department. Some other allocations within Pure Waters are based on square footage, how much square footage the staff resides, and for materials consumed out of the materials purchases and the inventory kept in the stockroom.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. I hope you're looking forward to an SAP migration of all this crap.
Very much so.
It's going to be a lot of fun. On page 585, I'm going to get rid of a bunch of my questions as a result of those answers. But on page 585, appropriations, environmental services, Pure Waters Administration Lab GIS, retention is increasing again, almost 100%. What's the reason for that increase?
The retention, Mr. Chairman, is really a function of,
What are we retaining? I'm sorry to interrupt.
oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. These are the quarterly employee retention bonuses that were originally $500 per calendar quarter that were increased to $1,000 per calendar quarter. And I don't remember when that happened. Earlier this year, April.
Understood. Thank you. And through Mr. Chairman, the administration, page 585 again, to the lab GIS maintenance line item equipment is increasing, again, over 100%. Address that increase.
I'm sorry, which equipment line?
Lab GIS maintenance equipment.
Oh, 504-290.
350 to 355K to 880K.
Oh, this particular budget line captures our maintenance of the electrical systems, the high voltage systems, plumbing, door repair. As you notice, in 2022, actual expenses charged to admin lab GIS was only 385 grand. Many of these are term services contracts, so the legislature authorizes a certain dollar amount for those term services, but we don't actually pay the contractor unless we pick up the phone and call them for work to be done.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield the floor for now.
Hughes Smith?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the, in September, I requested an update on the Climate Initiatives Fund request, and I'd like to follow up with that. At that time, you indicate that alternative power grounds maintenance equipment, that you were requesting 12 units, but to my knowledge, that has not come before legislature. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, we are in the process of procuring those EV mowers. That will go before, that will be approved through purchasing. It's out to bid presently, and there are 10 total.
Thank you, Mr. Garland. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration. I guess the update you gave me was 12 and the unit cost of 25,000. Could you clarify why, like, that can just go through purchasing and doesn't have?
Through the chair, the purchasing manager is authorized to approve purchases and procurement like that. In fact, many items do go through generally, supplies, materials, and, equipment, even vehicles for that matter. But it's generally the large capital projects that are approved by your honorable body.
Okay, thank you. I guess for that clarification, I thought we had to approve some fire truck at some point, so.
Mr. Chairman, that was a capital project through the CIP.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, the EV charging stations, if we could get an update on those. The budget book indicated that in 2023, you had completed stations at 111 Westville Road, Monroe Community Hospital, Innovative Field, and City Place. How many stations located at each of those four?
Through the chair, of those 5 locations you mentioned, there are 2 stations with 2 ports each. So that allows 4 vehicles to be charged at each of those 5 locations. So simple math, that's 20 vehicles could be charged at once.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chairman. Remember, you indicated you were requesting 10. So have all 10 that were requested in September been installed?
Through the chair, just by way of a quick update, we do have 4 other locations funded through a state grant. Those are in process now. We expect to have them operational by the second quarter of next year. Again, that's through a state grant that's come before your honorable body. MCC Downtown Campus, Brighton Campus, Webster Park, and Highland Park. So that will give, again, they'll be similar in configuration as the other 5. That will be 2 stations at each location with 2 ports each. So be a total of 16 ports for those additional 4 locations. Again, we expect that to be completed no later than the second quarter of 2024. There is a funding allocation in the 2024 budget in the amount of $530,000 for additional EV stations. We hope to be able to construct up to 10. That will be we're budget limited in that regard, that we have 530,000. Again, that came out of that $1 million allocation that was made this year. And so that work will begin in earnest in next year. And again, it's budgeted in the Pure Waters budget.
So just to clarify through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration, of the 605,000 for that purpose that you indicated in September, 530,000 of that is moving forward into 2020.
Through the chair, that is correct. I know we'd originally estimated 605, but we are, of that million, 530,000 is available for the EV charging stations. That we have encumbered, if you will, 470,000. That brings it up to $1 million. Again, for the zero-turn mowers, for a match for the organics management plan, match for the climate action or the climate adaptation and resiliency plan, as well as for the DOT lighting. In total, the EV stations plus those 4 projects I just mentioned, a total $1 million.
Thank you, Mr. Garland. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the administration. In September, you indicated that you were going to install level 2 and level 3 chargers. Has there been a level 3 charger installed anywhere?
Through the chair, no, there has not yet.
There are plans to do so?
The chair, not at this time.
Legislator Blankley, excuse me.
Just a couple of quick questions through you. The first of which, I just would like to revisit the conversation about the $2 million. I did not realize that had been going on since 2000. So I guess my first question is, has that been a steady amount?
I don't think 2014 was the start date of the subsidy. I think that was 2018 or 2019. But it has been an even $2 million every year. Oh, it was 2019.
Based on your math, Mr. Franklin, it sounds like we have about 4 more years to go if we're able to maintain that same general fund.
Mr. Chairman, if all things remaining consistent, and I don't predict the future, but the solid waste fund has been generating more than a $2 million surplus. I think it was $2.9 million for fiscal year 22. If the solid waste fund can keep up, I'm thinking 4 years, give or take. If it's just $2 million, it's going to take 5 years.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess that was, that answers my next question, but just to confirm. And so the reason for that $2 million is because it fits within the additional revenue they're generating, and you guys assess that year over year as you're going through. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman, yes.
Thank you very much. Shifting gears quickly to the DES engineering and facilities with the debt service and cash capital. I'm just wondering if you can walk us through the process for the decision around not using a capitalized bond versus paying out of the budget this year for that $2 million in the purchase of.
Although I'm not sure which page you're looking at, that's fine. I can answer this question no matter what department you're talking about when it comes to cash capital. We're really trying to focus on those capital projects that have been in the CIP every year, and every year at equal or somewhat equal dollar amounts. There are a variety of those projects. If the operational plan is to spend $1 million on a particular capital project every single year, it we had been borrowing that money and then paying back those bonds with the associated interest. So it only takes, depending on the project, depending on the period of probable usefulness that we borrow for, the debt service exceeds the annual budget we were going to spend either in year 7 or 8 for a shorter term or year 12, 13 for a longer term capital project. And we have DOT, culvert replacement, milling resurfacing. Our debt service exceeds the $1.5 million we budget to spend. So those are two recent conversions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my apologies. I was only referencing slide 5 of your presentation. I wasn't in the book. And that's helpful. So just to make sure that I understand appropriately as not being an expert in this, it sounds like if the cost of financing the debt is going to be higher than what it's going to take, then we're going to opt to generally choose to. Is that accurate?
Is Mr. Chairman, as long as the plan that the department has is to incur that spending on an annual basis, yes. I don't mind borrowing, Mr. Chairman. I think borrowing is very appropriate, especially for a longer-term capital project, which will benefit the residents of this county over 10, 15, 20 years. Then the beneficiaries of having that capital project completed should pay for its debt service. But IT equipment that we throw away after 3 years, I'm not anxious to bond for, or other projects.
Understood. Very much appreciated, Mr. Chairman. One last question. With regards to the Pure Waters appropriations, I noticed that the city of Rochester's appropriations are decreasing by $1.5 million or so. Is there an explanation for that you can share?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So a lot of the Rochester District's appropriation decline is tied to our contractual services. If you look at page 134 of the budget book, you see an overview of the appropriations needed for the Rochester District, and you'll see quite the decline in contractual services, which really is attributable to a lower utility cost, including and changes in the contracted debt that is allocated to other districts based on flows, transmission, conveyance, treatment. So that's a big decline. As is our interdepartmental charges. You'll see on page 134, interdepartmental charges decreasing from 25.8 million down to 23.8. Honestly, lower administrative charges for Pure Water's admin, parts, and labor. Those are done primarily through the work order system. And another legislator touched on the increase in cost for GCO district. Depending on where the work needs to be performed, at least in the 24 budget book, the dollars are supporting more work being done in the Gates GCO district than the Rochester district. That hasn't been the case every single year.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since some of the questions I had have been asked and answered, just a couple of quick thoughts through you to the administration. As a participant in the food scrap initiative out in Pittsburgh, I have to say it's going very well. Just a quick tip for people who might be concerned about some of the scraps smelling, we put them in our can and we put the can in a freezer. Scraps freeze. Quite easy to get it to the deposit place. It's working really well. So thank you for providing that program. And also, through the administration, I got a chance to use Echo Park the other day to recycle my metal from my lawn signs. It went really well. Very easy, very welcoming place. So thank you very much. One very quick question through the administration. Related to the airport, I just want to confirm that there are no tax levy dollars from the general fund that go to the airport, correct? And also, since mandates can be a question that's asked lots of times, is it mandated that a county have an airport?
No, Mr. Chairman, we're not mandated to have an airport. Once we have an airport, there are certain expenses that are coded in our system as mandated, like the retirement, we had to pay the FICA contribution, medical insurance.
But again, through you to the administration, Mr. Chairman, the airport is a fabulous asset. But really, the general fund isn't used to subsidize the airport.
That's right. It's a self-funding enterprise fund, Mr. Chairman.
Mafucci, okay, legislator McCabe.
On page 587, appropriations for environmental services, public works administration, information services. I think you hit this before, but the increase from 1 million to 1.7. What is the reason for this increase through the chair?
Mr. Chairman, yep, this is a charge, internal service charge from County IS. And yes, you're going to see in most departments a dramatic increase, mostly for the increase in appropriations within County IS.
And then on page 587, appropriations, environmental services, public works, the purchasing is decreasing from 536,000 down to 136,000, give or take. What's the reasoning behind the decrease in purchasing?
Again, Mr. Chairman, the indirect cost allocation plan does have a 2-year lag. 2020, 2021, and 2022, the amount of purchase orders processed through the purchasing office skyrocketed as purchasing under COVID. So they have a system, and all their activity, whether it's a purchase order, public bid, request for proposal, they capture that activity by department. And that activity is incorporated into our indirect cost allocation plan and then used to apportion a budget amount across the departments.
And then on the same page, same page, page 588, the Northwest Quadrant Solid Waste Transfer Contracts is increasing from, it was 0 in 23 to 748,000.
Yep, that's actually Mr. Chairman, a change in the approach here. 2024 is a new year for our approach. That 700 grand was previously included in commercial services, account 504205. So commercial services budget has dramatically decreased. The 23 amended number was 990. Going forward, we're requesting appropriations of only 341,000. And that's because those dollars were shifted to solid waste transfer contracts. Here, essentially, when you treatment plant treats water, it produces sludge, and we got to get rid of that. And how we do that is we haul it over to Millseat landfill. So we got to pay for that hauling.
Thank you. Then I'm gonna jump into a couple of revenue questions through the chair. On page 694, the MSLF lease agreement hosts going from 2.5 million to 2.6. What exactly is that?
So actually, I appreciate this, Mr. Chairman. I love it when a department does something that I fully support and wish I had thought of myself. Prior to 2023, the department used to record revenues in account 410205, miscellaneous revenue. And you'll see the 22 actual exceeded $4.9 million. The department has, because what's miscellaneous revenue? Well, we know what it is, and we have accounts that we can track it. So the department broke out completely the sale of recyclables revenues from the charge for leachates and septic sludge that we then take in to transport. They broke out the landfill host agreement revenue, and they broke out fees for the state DEC monitoring.
Thank you. And then, I have just two more questions and you can do it for all Pure Waters because I see that some of the assessments are increasing in several of them. And can you just give me a generic why?
Mr. Chairman, is the question specifically to the account Pure Waters Assessment 401010?
I'm gonna, like, on the, I'll give you an example, the Pure Waters, page 696, GCO district, and you can kind of generically answer is increasing from 7.2 million to 7.9 million. If you could just give me a generic explanation on that.
Mr. Chairman, the generic explanation, which will apply to all the districts, is primarily a result of a 3% rate increase.
Okay. And then my next question, again, generic with all the districts. You see some fund balance increases and some fund balance decreases. What would correlate for that?
Every year, Mr. Chairman, Pure Waters in some shape or form uses its accumulated available fund balance to support its ongoing operations. The 24 budget request has a use of fund balance from both the Rochester districts and Arundequoit Bay South Central. GCO doesn't have fund balance, so we don't ever appropriate GCO fund balance. So those are basically used to support the operations in those districts.
Thank you. I yield.
Later to Florio.
Thank you. Circling back to a couple of more appropriations questions on page 591, environmental services, Rochester District Field Operations, Commercial Services. There's a significant decrease from 5 million down to.
Mr. Chairman, that the biggest answer for the decline is they used to expense the cost of hauling that sludge as a commercial service because we have to contract that out. That has been moved to the account for the solid waste transfer.
Got it. Thank you. And that explains my next question, I think. So, thank you. And then a couple of revenue questions as well on page 701. Building operations fund balance increasing from 1 million to 3.5 million. The reasoning behind that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I got to turn to a different page.
No worries.
This one is related to the, I want to say it's a $3.1 million bond anticipation note that we're budgeting to redeem. That is for the countywide LED lighting replacement project, right? Yeah. So yeah, that's a $3 million that we're using that service fund available fund balance to redeem.
Thank you. And through the chair to the administration on page 701 as well, court facilities revenue decreasing. If the reasoning behind that anticipated decrease.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, that's really the work at the Hall of Justice. That is reimbursed by New York State. And it's really the work performed at their request.
Got it. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Through you to the administration, couple quick questions on page 595, again, appropriations. What's the reason for the increase in information services for Civic Center Complex, Hall of Justice, et cetera, 2023 to 2024?
Mr. Chair, all those internal service chargebacks are costs of the building that are shared by resident departments. So we accumulate the operating cost of running a building like COB, and then based on a ratio of square footage used by the residing departments, they bear the cost of that. So any changes, if I didn't add up all the numbers, Mr. Chairman, but as building costs increase, the charge back to the residing departments would increase as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield the floor for a moment.
Legislator DeFlorio, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a couple of personnel questions. Through the chair to the administration, what was the reasoning behind removing the listed titles, the supervisor of mechanical maintenance group 18 and the budget technician group 10?
Through the chair, the budget technician was reclassified to a revenue processor title in the budget, and the supervisor of mechanical maintenance group 18. And that was unintentionally omitted and has been fixed. Yeah, for supervisor mechanical maintenance is in the budget. And it's been fixed.
Thank you. And through the chair to the administration, the reasoning behind adding the listed titles, 2 staff assistant special projects, group 19, and then I think the revenue process supervisor you just mentioned, the group 15, resource recovery assistant, PT, group 10, and office clerk 1. So I guess just an explanation of why all of those positions were added.
Through the chair, again, this is a year-long process to meet the needs of the department. Again, I can touch on each of those, but again, they are all positions that are within specific areas and specific duties that reflect the needs of the department really anticipated going into next year.
Can you touch a little bit upon the 2 staff assistant special projects titles and what those individuals will be doing?
Again, through the chair, those 2 specific titles, again, relate to coordination and project management and also grant funding related to the department, both within Pure Water, solid waste, and across the department as a whole.
So, I'm sorry, through the chair to the administration, will they be working in any one of those specific areas, or, I mean, I guess I'm wondering how you're imagining allocating their duties.
They are, I guess I would characterize as a utility player per se, in the sense that they are available to work within any division. Again, the department was formerly 4 separate departments. DES was comprised of solid waste, which is a former department. Engineering, facilities and fleet was a separate department, as well as Pure Waters. And those positions will be involved in, again, evaluating grant opportunities, priority projects, capital projects, budget allocations, and really can work within the framework of DES and supporting the department and county needs.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration, are any of these specific ones listed here, will they be working on the climate action plan initiatives?
Through the chair, yes, I would say particularly through prioritizing projects and identifying grant funds, as well as our specific asks at the state level. So the short answer is yes.
Thank you. And through the chair to the administration, so similar question, what was the reasoning behind increasing the amount of positions for the titles? Principal Station Mechanic, Mechanical Group 15, Principal HVAC Service Engineer Group 95, HVAC Service Engineer Group 93, Assistant HVAC Service Engineer Group 90, and Senior Automotive Mechanic Group 11 by one position for each title.
Through, through the chair, the three positions I'd like to focus on relative to your question, we added a principal HVAC service engineer, we added an HVAC service engineer and an assistant HVAC service engineer. And Director Franklin mentioned those in his presentation. Given that our small HVAC group works virtually in every building in the county, with the exception of the hospital, but we are taking on new critical facilities at Children's Detention Center, which will be a significant facility in terms of size and capacity and critical need 24/7. City Place, now that we own that, that is a county HVAC responsibility, and it's a massive facility. And then ultimately the zoo. So there is really a need to expand our staff there. Any of the other increases that the other positions that you mentioned are not new positions. Perhaps there may have been upgrades, a single upgrade by group for those positions in prior budget, and we're cleaning them up in this particular budget. But there are only 3 new positions within the group that you had mentioned.
Thank you. And then final personnel question. I noticed there was a group change for the environmental lab tech manager from 17 to 18. Do you just expound on the reasoning behind that?
Yes, certainly. Through the chair, as you may recall, the Pure Waters lab that DES operates was a amalgamation, if you will, of the environmental health lab at the health department as well as a Pure Waters lab into one unified lab. And we felt that a Group 18 was commensurate with the skills and responsibilities that are required to operate a certified lab, again, both supporting the health department and Pure Waters. And we evaluated that title compared to other titles with similar responsibilities within the department, felt that a one-step, one-grade increase would be appropriate and commensurate with the responsibilities that the technical manager has on a daily basis.
If I can tag team onto that, Mr. Chairman, departments always ask for upgrades for their staff. When Director Garland said this was evaluated against similar positions in the county, it absolutely correct. We have lab managers within the medical examiner's office and public safety's crime lab. And just through the civil service classification unit, looked at their job duties, level of responsibility, and came to the agreement that this was appropriate.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to a question Legislator DeFlorio asked, and she asked you about will the new positions be supporting anything with the climate action plan, and you responded yes, Mr. Garland. Earlier, I think this year we allocated $1 million, I think it was, for phase 2 of the climate action plan. Are these positions being funded from that money?
Through the chair, no. The $1 million that was allocated was for a number of projects I might have mentioned earlier, the EV mowers, funding matches for organics management plan, a number of other projects. That $1 million wasn't used to offset staff time.
I will, again, tag team, Mr. Chairman. The sustainability coordinator is funded within the general fund, but that is through general fund appropriations. It's not the committed fund balance of $1 million. That's strictly for the actual project work itself.
Okay, and through you, Mr. Chairman, this may sound bad, and I don't know how else to phrase it. but is there any place else in the budget, the things related to the climate action plan, this is what's gonna sound bad, are being hidden?
Through the chair, no, in fact, there's really, I mean, we can articulate and identify where any funding we have specific to climate and sustainability. Again, as I referenced those other two positions, again, there are positions that can support those two that you had asked about those two. Can support the climate action initiative to identify funding and assist when and where needed. But the dedicated staff is our sustainability manager. And that's funded in the budget. We also have membership for a professional association that we rely on for climate action, as well as a $530,000 for the EV stations. So really those three elements are what's within our budget ask: $530,000 for the EV stations, staff for the climate or sustainability manager, and the professional association.
Last time I'm gonna tag, listen to me. I am gonna tag team. In last year's EPW presentation, I didn't talk about it this year, but I talked about it last year during the presentation, if you want to pull up YouTube. The Deputy Director for Environmental Services, Clem, is overseeing the management of our sustainability, environmental improvement, and the specific climate action initiatives as recommended by the Climate Action Plan. And there is a reason the Deputy Director is in charge of that. And we're trying to, as I said, blur organizational lines and make siloed functional units actually talk and work together. That is important to the success of any broad initiative. Are there any other positions being funded? Not necessarily. I will say, I go to some meetings regarding climate action initiatives. You're not going to see that in the budget. It's just part of my daily salary. But I think you will see a lot of people at different times go to different climate initiative or sustainable or environmental improvement meetings that are requested to be there because they have some kind of experience or knowledge to bring to the table. So it's almost like a in-kind contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Growl and Mr. Franklin. I just want to make a comment here, Mr. Chairman, to the administration. In my prior role as an IBM client executive, I worked with multi-billion-dollar corporations and with the C-suites was my specific job as a client executive. In almost every one of those, some project would come along that got scattered through the corporation for many of the same reasons you just enumerated, Mr. Franklin, and I applaud working across boundaries. But the CEO became completely unaware of what the cost of that activity was because it had become so dispersed. And perhaps several situations they were very unhappy with how large the money they were spending on something they did not consider to, require that level of expense. So would it be possible for the administration to pull together an estimate of what's being spent for the climate action plan? And I'm not trying to say I don't agree with a climate action plan. I'm just trying to make sure that we aren't suddenly spending a whole lot more money than we think we are when we still have things like sheriffs that are, 150 sheriff positions that are empty, et cetera, et cetera. Is it possible to pull something like that together?
Mr. Chairman, I guess a couple comments. Again, I don't predict the future. From the work done in 22, 23, what we're proposing for 24, I think for governmental purposes, more than adequately captures the expenses incurred related to sustainability, environmental quality improvement, climate action initiatives. 5 years from now, if we pull in county employees to attend some kind of meeting or series of meetings because they have expertise to bring to the table, the ERP systems we are looking at have the ability to add tags to employee time. The attorneys in law department, you know, old school, they keep a calendar of what clients they
They
work
bill.
for. It's almost like they're billing them, right? You can do that in the ERP systems we're looking at. For the purchase of, I don't know, these cleaners, hand sanitizers, you could not only expense this to environmental services, some fund center, you could also tag it that it was because of project ABC. We don't have that ability in SAP. Of course, Mr. Chairman, that all is going to rely on the staff taking the time to put little tags on their purchase in the system, but it can be done.
Okay. I'm gonna move on from that. Through you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is about your groupings. There's a group for computer business analyst, DES, changed from 14 to 16 in the budget.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was talking.
That's okay. I was doing it before with Tracy. Legislator Florio. Why was the group changed for the type position of computer business analyst, DES, from 14 to 16 in the budget?
Through the chair, this is a position that we have looked at very carefully based on the level of support that this position is responsible throughout the department. We work very closely with HR. We reevaluated their duties and responsibilities. It's grown significantly in that position. And so based on that technical support that that individual provides, HR concurred with our upgrade request that the duties and responsibilities, again, supporting the entire department on technology and other related work was suitable for a group 16.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chairman of the administration, was this in any way related to competitiveness of the, keeping people in the job, so to speak?
Through the chair, certainly we always want to do everything we can do to retain our employees. But I would say for this one in particular, this had primarily to do with their duties and responsibilities. And hopefully the effect of that will be able to retain that employee for the balance of their career.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chairman of the administration, was this done for all positions, all job categories in the department? This type of analysis?
Through the chair, no, we didn't go through each and every position. Again, we, throughout the year, we are mindful of the work that our employees are doing. And if we feel that their duties and responsibilities have increased, we will take a close look at that in consultation with HR and determine if sufficient change has occurred that warrants a group change. But again, that's something that we contemplate throughout the year. And as we approach budget time, determine where we want to make an ask. And we felt the ones that were approved here were our highest priorities.
Okay. There are other situations where levels changed, like your environmental chemists, all, chemist 1, 2, 3, all increased a couple of levels in the budget. Same explanation or something different?
Through the chair, short answer is, yep, same explanation. Again, there too, we want to retain those critical employees that have a high degree of qualifications to work in the laboratory. We want to make sure we're providing a competitive environment. And again, that their grade is commensurate with their duties and responsibilities.
And also, Mr. Chairman, commensurate with the duties and responsibilities of similarly titled positions in the crime lab and the medical examiner's office.
Okay. Once again, just by way of explanation, Mr. Chairman of the administration, I hope this isn't the case of the squeaky wheel getting the grease, so to speak, where the people that the managers are aware of that are killing themselves and have had increased responsibilities are getting pay, and the meek little mouse that sits in the corner doing 4 times what they're doing increase is being ignored. It is very, very easy to have that happen, and I yield the
Mr.
floor.
Chairman, for 20 years, the squeaky wheel has gotten the grease, and I've been saying since 2019, when I was walking out the door, that our pay was probably the greatest threat to Monroe County government, in that our pay has been held low for 2 decades because of very real financial concerns at the county. Not many other choices but to hold down pay. I will say the Federation of Social Workers went 7 years with 0. CSCA went, I think, 8 years of 0, which means M&Ps from 2000 to 2008, 0. There are a number of us who like to look at our social security statement and look at our earnings from 2008 and then 2016, and it's the same. I didn't count the number, but I'm gonna risk lying to this committee that there's less than a dozen upgrades in this budget book this year. And I say that, like, I don't know, pick a position, CFO going from group 14 to group 16, that kind of an upgrade. It might be, as Director Gellin said, a review because life changes over 2 decades and the job descriptions here haven't, that we have to look at them after 20 years. So maybe instead of being CFO in this budget, I'm now, senior CFO, something like that. So that has definitely occurred. And a lot of that has been the squeaky wheel gets the grease for 20 years, but we are making a very concerted effort to stop the one-off upgrades or title reclassifications and truly address pay. That is why the county executive was supported, this legislature was supported last, April of 22 with a 2% off-contract pay raise. That's never happened here before. And I know 2% is chump change. I get it, but it was something and it moves us forward. And, not commenting on any specific union contract, but we are trying to negotiate at least a little higher for the first year and settle back a little for years 2 and 3 in our settlement agreements. But, so maybe now is a good time to talk about the other questions that aren't being asked around salaries in this budget, because nobody cares what medical plan I select. What they care about is how much you pay me and what my benefits cost in total. Or maybe it's not a good time to talk about that. I guess I'll leave it. Oh, yeah, because I mentioned me as the example. All right, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to belabor the point. Our pay is the biggest threat to this county, and it's being addressed. We can't fix it in 1 year. And we had a plan to fix it over the course of 2 or 3 years, but you will hear from so many business owners in this town and across the country that we can't find people. I mean, nobody wants to work anymore. And when you finally do find people employed, they're all demanding more money. So wage inflation is a very real issue, and Monroe County is feeling the effects of that, not just in our own payroll, but in the contracts we have to pay. I guess I'll already get off that soapbox, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you, Mr. Franklin. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I couldn't agree with you more. My 8 years in the legislature, which is soon coming to an end, my biggest fear has been that our pay is so non-competitive, not just with surrounding counties, but with businesses. I mean, people can make more doing a flip the burger job than they can make doing an important job helping kids in the county, for example. And if you think that hasn't bothered me sitting here, it has in a big way. And now with inflation, I don't know how we ever catch up.
I guess I do have, I have a thought, Mr. Chairman, and I guess I'll go back to what I didn't want to talk about, but, in the past year or so, there's been a lot of commentary in campaigns and even some questioning at committees about positions that are funded but vacant, positions that are defunded in the budget, and are we artificially inflating our payroll budget to create a slush fund? And the answer, Mr. Chairman, is no. I will say we have a vacancy problem, and you all know that because it gets asked and answered at every committee meeting I attend. At least I can say that the budgetary savings being achieved because of our vacancies, one, we don't want vacancies. We actually want to hire people, and we've hired 2 recruiters, and we're paying a company to help drive a countywide employee recruitment campaign. We want to fill these positions, and we damn well better have the appropriations to pay them, because once I hire somebody, state and federal labor law says I actually got to pay them. Well, we need these appropriations to pay them. When we do have real vacancies and we really drive budgetary savings because we can't fill all our positions, a couple things about that. One thing is a lot of our positions here have revenue tied to them. So when questions come about or campaigning comes about that says we, on average budget $70,000 per employee, we're overtaxing our people. Well, we have reimbursement tied to our staff. Every department in this budget has some kind of revenue. Some of it's a percentage reimbursement, and some of it is because we deliver services that we pay for. So when we did have budgetary savings in salaries, the county executive was supportive and the full legislature was supportive of that off-contract 2% pay raise. So at least we're trying to take a strategy where when we reasonably can predict we're going to have a budgetary savings related to payroll, we plow it right back into our payroll through an off-contract pay raise. So slowly, we are going to be addressing our historical low rate of pay. It takes way longer than anyone wants it to.
I yield the floor.
Questions. Yeah, well, through myself to the administration, I actually have 3 quick, these are easy questions. Because I'm not sure everybody's going to be here for tomorrow night's Ways and Means, but the 3 questions I think are
December 7th. Ways and Means is rescheduled December 7th. That's a Thursday.
But I just think the 3 questions would be, what was the enacted budget in 2021 for Monroe County? And what compared to the projected budget that we're going to be passing this year? Was it about 1.1 versus 1.4 in rough numbers?
I can tell you tonight, it was probably in 2021.
Yes.
It was probably between 1.25 and 1.3 billion. And now we're at 1.45 billion.
Okay, so it's up about 200 million over the 4-year period.
Probably a little more than that.
Okay.
I mean, this budget is the appropriations increase is 119.9 million. You know what? The other budgets weren't so bad. Last year's budget increase was 64 million. The budget before that was even less. So yeah, you're in the ballpark.
Okay, so it's 250 million over the 4 years. All right, and then what would during that same period of time, 21 to 24, what was the total sales tax revenue that we had come in, and what was the total property tax revenue that we had come in?
The property tax revenue is an easy question to answer because that is laid out for you on page 60 of the budget book.
In 21, the property tax levy was 415.4 million. And now it's 430.2. So you're talking,
15 million over the 4-year period.
yeah,
Okay, and what would sales tax have been during that 4 years?
so sales taxes, I tend to talk about the share we retain. In 21, you know, you're testing my memory here, but I would probably hazard a guess, 140, 150 million versus 200 million or 206 that we're budgeting.
Okay, so with the increases, during this same time frame, COVID money was available. And was that all directly or indirectly from the feds to the state? Or was there any COVID money that came directly to the county?
It's a mix, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and what would you say that is roughly in terms of?
We got 235 million in CARES Act money. We got 124 million in ARPA dollars,
But CARES Act was about 240 million?
144 million for ARPA. Thank you.
ARPA, right. And the
CARES Act was
130 or 230?
I think it was like 230, was it?
Okay, well, the reason why I'm saying that is over that, I know we can't project what the future is gonna be, but we're looking at the 4 years in the past, trying to project where we're gonna be at the 4 years in the future. There is no more CARES Act money coming in. I think we have it all so far, right? There won't be any more trickling in the future?
Good assumption.
Okay, so, your consensus of where we might be in the next 4 years, seeing the fact that 230 million in CARES Act is not going to be there, and considering that we may not have a big rise in property tax, we just have the lowest property tax rate that's been around in maybe my lifetime. So what is your projection on a personal level anyway, as to how you think we're going to be able to balance the budgets in the future?
Mr. Chairman, on page 384 or 387 of the budget book is a 2-year forecast. I don't like to go out 4 years. Too much changes and out that far. I like the 2-year forward-looking forecast. The forecasted deficit is higher than what it showed in this budget book back in the 23 budget book, the 22 budget book. So as a legislature and as a management team, we need to be aware of this and we need to think about this. I will tell you on page 387 of the budget book, the 25 projected deficit is 13.2 million. The 26 projected deficit is 29 million. A lot of assumptions go into this, right, Mr. Chairman? Projections of public assistance growth, projections of revenue growth, sales tax revenue growth, property tax revenue growth. We try in conservative budgeting and conservative forecasting, we take a very realistic approach to forecasting out increases in our expenses. And we hedge a little bit more, take a more conservative approach in our projected growth of revenues. So no matter what year we're sitting here, this 2-year forecast, if done under conservative budgeting methods, will always have a forecasted deficit. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That shows conservative budgeting. How much should that forecasted deficit be? I don't know, 15 million, 20 million? I mean, I'm not particularly worried about next year's forecasted $13.2 million deficit. I'm not necessarily worried about the 26 projected deficit of 29 million. And I only say that because I took this job in January of 2013, and these were like $100 million, right? Not 13 and 29.
I think I've commented at prior committee meetings, if this county knows how to do one thing well, it's not spend money. So I think we can manage these without tricks and gimmicks. Although I did sell the terminal building twice, so I know how to do them.
Oh, that's very good.
I think it's manageable, but I think it's important to have a forecast that shows these deficits. And what's particularly important is the deficit is growing. So you just need to be very aware. And so I'm happy to report to you and the members here that the management team sitting around this room has been very good. And they all have programs that they want to move forward. And when things get tough, they understand and they know they scale back.
And about how much money do we get in state aid, direct state aid every year?
$140 million.
140? And the reason I'm
160,
saying that.
maybe
because
180.
The state
Yeah,
comptroller.
maybe it's 180 million, Mr. Chairman.
180, and that's consistent? That is a lump sum that comes in?
Yeah, reasonably consistent.
Okay. It's like school aid to the school, then we just get our share of
It's
state aid.
because for counties, Mr. Chairman, most of our state aid takes the form of reimbursement for services delivered. Look at this budget book. More than half the county budget is social services. Well, that's where most of the revenue comes from. Because it's all, you spend $1 to get some percentage back. Now, all the departments have some reimbursement. Public safety, we get, I think, 12% for probation staff. MCH gets Medicaid reimbursement. It's built into their cost structure, but it's like 90% reimbursement.
Right,
I don't
well,
think
I'm
even
saying that,
departments
yeah, I follow what you're saying, but the state comptroller has projected that the state is gonna have billions of dollars in shortfall, and I'm worried, or not worried, but concerned that maybe the state will cut back, and that makes it a little worse for the municipalities and the counties in the state, because if they're forced to cut back, that comes, trickles down the line.
So the comptroller does what I do, and that's say, in 2 years, you're gonna have a deficit. Because you gotta make managers think.
Well, very good. Thanks for doing all that. I just want to thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. These men and women have read and studied the budget, come up with all kinds of great questions. 2.5 hours worth. Thank you for the administration, what you guys have done and helping us out. And we're going to take a 5-minute break right now. So anybody that has to do anything will get a 5-minute break. All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to resume. Okay. Okay, the approval of the minutes. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. You have before you the October 24th, 2023 minutes of the Environmental and Public Health Public Works Committee before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified before the end of the day of any changes. Next item on the agenda is new business.
Referral number 23-0362, classification of action and determination of significance pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act for the sale of county-owned tax foreclosure property located at 21 Bachman Road in the town of Arundecoit.
Moved by legislator McCain, seconded by legislator DeFlorio. Questions? Comments? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Item carries.
Referral number 23-0364, classification of action and determination of significance pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act for the sale of county-owned tax foreclosure property located at 50 Ashland Rise in the town of Penfield.
By legislator DeFlorio, second by legislator Hebert. Any discussion? Questions? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries.
Referral number 23-0366, classification of action and determination of significance pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act for the jurisdictional transfer of a portion of Old Brooks Avenue in the town of Gates to the town.
Moved by legislator Hebert, second by legislator McCabe. Any comments, questions? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Item carries.
Referral number 23-0368, classification of action and determination of significance pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act for the acquisition of easements for Calkins Road Highway Improvement Project in the town of Henrietta.
By legislator McCabe, second by legislator DeFlorio. Any comments, questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? None. The ayes have it. Item carries.
Referral number 23-0370, acceptance of a grant from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation for municipal food scraps recycling initiatives.
Legislator DeFlorio, second by legislator Hebert. Any comments, questions? Legislator McCabe.
Oh, excuse me. Through the chair, is this the only grant we should expect to receive for various food scraps initiatives expected in 24?
Through the chair, this is intended to be a one-time grant opportunity through New York State.
Thank you. I yield.
Other comments, questions? All those in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Item carries.
Referral number 23-0372, authorized contracts with CNS Engineers, CHA Consulting, McFarland Johnson, and Passero Associates Engineering, Architecture and Surveying for airport consulting term services for the Frederick Douglass Greater Rochester International Airport.
By legislator Hebert, second by legislator McCabe. Any questions or discussions? Legislator Hebert.
Chairman, through you to the administration, what's the maximum value of these contracts by company?
Through the chair, there is no maximum per contract. It's on a project-by-project basis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And through you to the administration, is there a maximum value for these contracts? It could be something unique for the airport, but generally when we do these generic help contracts, there's some maximum value on them, and I don't see one in the referral.
Through the chair, so these contracts are only used for capital improvement projects, not for regular operating projects. And if there is a public works project is results from this, that'll come back to the ledge for approval, the construction contract. And this is really unique to the airport. You may recall we do term contracts, A&E contracts through Pure Waters or Solid Waste, where we have a smaller defined project that would have a limit to, but that is not the case at the airport.
Through you, Mr. Chairman of the administration, I believe I just heard you say that these are for capital improvement projects, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Through the chair of the administration, could we somehow word it so that it actually says that in the referral? Because I've reread it many times and either I'm reading the same thing because I want to see the wrong stuff or it's not there.
Mr. Chairman, you really have to turn your attention to the second page where it's the funding paragraph at the top. Funding for these contracts consistent with authorized uses is included in the capital funds established for specific projects or from Monroe County Airport Authority accounts is authorized by the Airport Authority. So this funding paragraph refers to that this is for the exclusive use of Airport Enterprise Fund capital projects or for projects procured and paid for by the Airport Authority.
And through, thank you for the response, but through you, Mr. Chairman, I see no upper limit on this. And so we're effectively telling the Airport Authority, spend it as much as you'd like for this stuff, as long as it's in a capital project. He had shaken no, but I don't see where it says differently. Guess I'm sticking
Through the
for that.
chair, when these engineering firms are hired for a specific project, first, these engineering firms have extensive experience in airport improvement projects through the FAA. But the important part of what I'm saying is that typically these are FAA funded projects based on the 90%, 5%, 5% ratio for funding construction on the airfield and in the terminal project. A part of that review process is that the FAA Airport District Office in New York City will review the estimated cost for these engineering firms. If they determine that the cost is reasonable, then we get notified of that via email or letter, and we can continue through the legislative process, which comes to your body, committees, county legislature approval, ultimately county executive approval of that contract. If they determine that the estimate by one of the engineering firms is not reasonable, then they will come back to us and say, we don't accept this. And then we have to go back to the engineering firm and talk about why it's unacceptable, how they can pare down the cost. So there are mechanisms in the process that ensure that costs are not inflated or escalated beyond fair market value and reviewed by the FAA, which funds 90% of the cost.
Thank you, but, and through you, Mr. Chairman, that 10% that is the remaining 10% is funded by the county, as I recall.
Of the 10%, 5% is actually funded by the county, but really funded by the Airport Authority. And then 5% is funded by the New York State Department of Transportation.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, my simple concern is I don't want to sign a blank check. And not that I care that the county signs a blank check, I care that our constituents end up paying for a blank check.
Through the chair,
Help me through that.
Sure, absolutely. That's why there's checks and balances in the process with the FAA to make sure that the estimate that is given to us by one of the engineering firms for their design and engineering services on a particular project is within acceptable standards. So there is that review process from FAA engineers and estimators to make sure those costs are in line with what they believe they should be. That's one check and balance. And then the second check and balance is actually this legislative body that would see those costs and then, question me why those costs are what they are they fair? And then go through the legislative process here. So there's two checks and balances on that.
Thank you. Through Mr. Chairman, So is the purpose of this referral simply to allow you to engage these engineering firms to do the pre-work with no cost associated with that?
That, through the chair, yes, the purpose of this referral is for us to engage these 4 engineering firms who are specialists in airport type runway, taxiway, ramp, terminal, roadway type projects. They do a lot of airport projects across the northeast part of the United States. There's no financial obligation with this particular resolution before you. It's just to authorize us to work with these engineering firms. Then once we identify a particular project, make a selection of an engineering firm, and then they give us an estimate for their services. And then that starts the checks and balances on making sure that that cost is within reason for the work that we're asking them to do.
Thank you. That makes me a lot more comfortable through you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe next time when this comes up, put that into the wording, and idiots like me won't take up your time. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. The opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Item carries.
Referral number 23-0373, authorized contracts with Barton and Logedice Environmental Design and Research, Landscape Architecture, Engineering, and Environmental Services, Lucero Associates, Engineering, Architect, and Surveying, and T. Wyland International Engineering and Architecture for Parks, Architectural, and Engineering Term Services.
Moved by Legislator McCabe, second by Legislator DeFlorio. Any questions or discussion? Okay, then all those in favor signify by saying aye. All those against by saying nay. Ayes have it. Item carries.
Referral number 23-0374, authorize a contract with Clean Harbors Environmental Services to collect, transport, and dispose of household hazardous waste to support the Monroe County Pure Waters Industrial Waste Program.
By Legislator DeFlorio, second by Legislator Hebert. Any questions or discussion? Legislator Hebert.
Echo Park hours are currently limited to Wednesdays and Saturdays. Are any changes anticipated for the availability of Echo Park to our constituents?
Through the chair, not at this time.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Item carries. Okay, is there any other matters of business before this committee this evening? Okay, there being no other matters, the November 27th, 2023 meeting of Environmental and Public Works Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Environment and Public Works Committee will be announced. Thank you all for coming. Meeting is concluded.